Hi there, I'm Wayne Lloyd, CEO of ShiftCarbon, and I'm here with Qayyum Rajan, Head of Carbon Markets at ShiftCarbon. And today we're going to talk about the carbon credit life cycle. What does it mean for a carbon credit to be verified, used, retired, all those things? Um, so in previous videos, and those links are going to be in the description, we talked about number one, what is a carbon credit market and what are the voluntary carbon credits? What do they mean for organizations that are purchasing them from companies like Shift Carbon? And in the other video, we talked about what is fractionalization and how we're introducing the concept into the voluntary carbon credit markets. Um, but today we're going to talk about what happens on a technical level with the creation and use of a carbon credit. So maybe Q, you can take it away.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, and it is a long process to actually go through all of this. And so, you know, we'll start with each of the registries because they all have a list of different methodologies that are actually allowed. So somebody can't just come up and say, "Hey, I want to do this type of carbon project," and issue some offsets. There's a defined, very specific guidelines on what kinds of projects are allowed and can be implemented. And so project developers will typically use these methodologies, or they might propose a new one if they don't have that already. Um, once they determine that this is an accepted methodology, they'll actually go out and implement the project. And so they'll get the finance in, they'll do the project, whether it's reforestation or solar or whatever it is, and they'll typically work with a project verifier who works within these guidelines to ensure that the way that they're measuring, reporting, and verifying all of these components are suitable to the registry. Once they've done this project, created it, and are in a place where it is compliant with the registries, they'll submit that, and ultimately this will be awarded by the registry, or not awarded, but issued within their registry account. And all of a sudden there'll be, a balance of 1 million credits or whatever it is that is tangible and can be sold after that as verified units of carbon. And then once these credits are sold and used, eventually somebody purchases them for actual use to offset their own emissions. And that's at that point, that's the terminology which is called retired, and that's as that credit's used up. So it's quite a process.
Yeah, so maybe we can just quickly give a review of some of the examples of the projects that might fit into the verification standards that we use.
Yeah, there's two very high level buckets, if you want to call them that. So one is avoidance and one is removal. And so avoidance seeks to do methodologies which would have, avoided what would have been there before. A good example of that is, rainforest, protection rainforest, which is typically known as Red Plus under that program. And that is typically saying that, hey, here's a rainforest that was going to be developed or cut down or burned or used as a farm or something. And instead, we're going to take a process to make sure that this is protected and saved going forward. And so each year that you save that rainforest, you've avoided the emissions that would have come from actually developing and using that rainforest. And that's a really good example of avoidance. Another one is renewable energy, so solar or wind, where it's typically done in rural areas where they might have been used in some other, or developing countries where they might have been using something like diesel or something much less energy efficient. You create these wind farms, these solar farms, and that energy is redistributed back. And you can very tangibly say, hey, we are using a much better energy source, and each year, we've saved this much of the differential of emissions that would have happened. Probably the last one there is like cook stoves, which are done in rural communities where they use energy, not very efficient cook stoves. These are implemented, they are measured on a yearly basis to understand the usage, and that's directly offset in what would have otherwise been a higher emission. So that's all the avoidance ones, and I would say that's the bulk of projects that exist today. But recently, we are seeing a shift to removal, which directly takes things out of the atmosphere. There's things like biochar, kelp farming. These are typically more expensive, more experimental, innovative projects, but you can expect to see more of these over the next few years.
Yeah, and if you look at our fractionalization video, we talk a lot about how, we use our products and technology to help support those those much more experimental, expensive, but ultimately higher impact projects. So you talked a little bit about verification. Maybe just discuss who ShiftCarbon is working with and sort of the credibility around those bodies.
Yeah, there's quite a few carbon registries that exist, and so we work with all of them, but primarily we work with what's known as the Big Six. So there's Vira, Gold Standard, there's the American Carbon Registry, Piro, and a few others. And so, we work very closely with them and the projects that are created, developed within them. They each have their own specializations and sort of, approach to things. But between those, we'd say those are the highest quality offsets that you can get today.
Okay, great. So let's just do a quick recap. So what happens after a project is verified?
So after a project is verified, there's a balance of offsets or credits that are issued in the registry accounts of these the project developers, and this then becomes tradable. So they might sell this all to one person, or it might go to a broker or to different places, and so there's a whole secondary market that comes up to this. But at the end of the day, this is going to be sold to somebody who is using it to offset the emissions that they have produced. And so since each of these are 1 ton of carbon, at some point or another, somebody is going to offset a ton that they reduced, that they used with a ton that's going to be reduced, the credit. And at that point, this is marked as retired for that person, and that credit is used up, which is then the end of that life cycle of the credit.
Perfect. Well, that's great. How does ShiftCarbon fit into this life cycle?
Yeah, so as you can imagine, there's a lot of software, there's a lot of regulation and things that are involved in this process. And so, for a company that wants to purchase offsets, you don't want to create a whole sustainability team and carbon traders and all these components that are needed to, verify these projects and then actually use them. And so, what we do is we are linked up to all the registries, and so we'll work with you to understand which offsets and credits you need. We'll do the due diligence, make sure that these are all high quality and trustworthy. We'll actually be the ones to take ownership of those credits and offset them on your behalf. So you don't need to touch the registry. You don't need to create all this infrastructure. We'll handle all of the diligence and administration from there. It's pretty much we're like your carbon concierge.
Yeah, amazing. I think, there's a lot of details and technology and overhead and
Yeah.
thinking in this area. And I think like, if there's one thing I would say, it's just that Shift Carbon, number one, it connects you to the entire carbon market. So it's not like working with a single broker that's only going to give you a small window into the carbon market. You really see the true size of the carbon market, and we handle everything that happens in the background. And so the other thing that we do is we also help originate some of these projects, um, both from a price discovery standpoint, where we're agreeing to take on some of these inventories, and we also have technology that helps measure, report, and verify the actual usage of the product. So we have a whole IoT division that helps do that, and that's really there just to accelerate the adoption and the creation of more carbon credit projects. So we'll talk about MRV automation, a lot of the other stuff in further videos. Thanks for watching.